Imagine yourself in a world where Rome's armies were feared in every corner of the known map, with disciplined soldiers and generals willing to do anything to maintain the glory of the Republic. Now, think of a military failure so colossal that it shook all that confidence. At the Battle of Carrhae in 53 BC, General Marcus Licinius Crassus faced the Parthian forces commanded by Surena and witnessed a humiliating defeat. What few know is that after Crassus's death and the crushing of his legions, about 10,000 Roman soldiers were captured and disappeared from official history. These were men who had families, ambitions, and dreams, but they were swallowed by an uncertain fate in foreign lands. What happened to this captured contingent? Did they survive under unimaginable conditions, or did they find a new purpose? In this story, we will follow the trail of these forgotten soldiers and learn every step that led them to one of the greatest mysteries of antiquity. You will discover thrilling details, unexpected twists, and theories that still intrigue historians today. But before we dive into this incredible story, make sure you're subscribed to our channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of our videos packed with historical curiosities about ancient Rome. The collapse of Rome at Carrhae. Get ready, because our first chapter will show you the exact moment when everything fell apart for Crassus and his men. The Battle of Carrhae marked a turning point for the Roman Republic. Crassus, driven by a thirst for glory and wealth, believed he would easily defeat the Parthians, even without deeply understanding the terrain and the enemy's fighting style. The Parthian cavalry, famous for its agility and mastery of the bow and arrow, proved unbeatable. In the open field, the legions, trained for close combat, felt the terror of the Parthian arrows on their very skin. It was on arid ground, with no shelter in sight, that Rome tasted the bitter flavor of defeat. General Crassus, realizing the tactical disadvantage and suffering devastating casualties, tried to negotiate a truce with Surena. However, the outcome was tragic. Crassus was killed in a humiliating manner, ending a career marked by both ambition and fortune. The Roman army, witnessing their commander's downfall, fell into moral collapse. Many battalions became disorganized and retreated, leaving behind the dead, wounded, and later thousands of men who would end up as Parthian prisoners. The beginning of the escape and disorientation. And if you think that defeat alone was terrible, wait until you learn about the despair of the Romans as they tried to escape that nightmare. Disconnected from any chain of command, the survivors, scattered throughout the region, seeking shelter on farms, in villages, and anywhere that could offer a moment of tranquility. However, the shock of that defeat was not merely about fear. The local population, resentful of the constant looting and abuses committed by the Romans during the campaign, refused to help. Sometimes they even betrayed the fugitives by handing them over to the Parthians or acting out of personal vengeance. Some small units of legionaries still attempted to maintain discipline and set up makeshift defensive positions. Yet the Parthian pursuit was relentless. Without the leadership of Crassus or other officers capable of unifying these groups, most of the Romans were hunted down and captured. Among the soldiers, rumors began to circulate that Surena had a different plan. He wouldn't kill them, but would force them to live under dreadful conditions as an example to the world of Parthian power. Have you ever wondered how events like these shape the destiny of an entire empire? Leave your like right now so we can keep bringing you stories as impactful as this one. Prisoners and the shame of the eagles. Now imagine the ultimate symbol of Roman power, the legionary eagles, in enemy hands. You are about to learn why this was so devastating. For the Roman legions, losing the eagles meant much more than just having an object stolen. It represented Rome's very honor being tarnished. Each legion had its eagle, a sacred standard, and protecting it was a fundamental duty for every soldier. It was preferable to die than to see it fall into enemy hands. However, at Carrhae, the Parthians managed to capture several of these eagles, turning them into war trophies. In the accounts of ancient historians like Plutarch, we see how deeply this wounded Roman pride. The soldiers who had their eagles taken felt doubly defeated. They not only lost the battle, but also their identity as legionaries. The fate of these prisoners was even more cruel. Chained and under constant watch, many were forced to parade, in public to be humiliated. Just hearing about these events made the citizens of Rome feel their anger and shame boiling in their hearts. The ridicule of a false Crassus, and if you thought the humiliation couldn't get any worse, get ready to hear about the shocking mockery imposed on the Romans by their enemy. One detail narrated by ancient chroniclers is the episode where the Parthians found a Roman soldier who bore a striking physical resemblance to Marcus Licinius Crassus. Aware of the symbolic value of this discovery, they decided to dress this man in feminine clothing and force him to parade in public, representing a cruel mockery of Roman customs. This false Crassus became a macabre attraction. The Parthians demanded that the other prisoners greet him as if he were the true general, evoking the pomp of Roman triumphs. Such a scene was a clear provocation. If the Romans celebrated victory by parading prisoners and treasures, now they were on the opposite side of the coin, suffering the same humiliation, or worse, across all of Parthia. Besides damaging the honor of the soldiers, this public display undermined any remaining hope or courage in those men. Every insult, every burst of laughter was like a knife to the reputation that Rome had built over centuries. Had you already heard of this intriguing detail? Leave a comment below and share your thoughts on this form of humiliation. Surena's order and the path to Alexandria Margiana. After that demonstration of power and contempt, why did the Parthians simply not execute all the prisoners? Now let's discover Surena's plan for these men. Surena, the great Parthian strategist, decided to give these legionaries a different fate. Instead of selling them as slaves or executing them, he decreed that they be sent to Alexandria Margiana, a region on the eastern border of the Parthian Empire. Many questioned this decision. Why not eliminate the enemy completely, ending the threat these Romans might one day pose? The answer may lie in Surena's strategic mindset. He knew that by keeping these men alive, he could use them as a sort of shield or even as military labor in areas of constant conflict. Moreover, every living Roman prisoner was a permanent reminder to the Republic that its legions were not invincible. Thus, the forced march to Alexandria Margiana was a true test of endurance. Hungry, thirsty, and overburdened, the captured soldiers were closely monitored by Parthian patrols. Those who tried to escape were punished with death, and their bodies served as a warning to others. Life as mercenaries in distant lands. And what if, suddenly, you had to fight not only against your former comrades, but also to defend the territory of your worst enemy? That was the fate awaiting many of these Romans. In Alexandria Margiana, life was not easy, but it offered the soldiers a chance to survive. Surena, aware of the Romans' combat prowess, began to use them as mercenaries in small regional conflicts. These legionaries, who once marched proudly along the Roman roads, now had to fight on behalf of the Parthians. The accounts of this period are scarce, but some historians suggest that Roman discipline proved useful in regions that needed trained manpower. Whether it was maintaining fortifications, patrolling, or engaging in skirmishes, these prisoners found a way of life, albeit a bitter one, as they served an army that had once massacred their comrades. For some, this change was unbearable. The idea of fighting against their own people and further tarnishing Roman honor fueled internal tensions. However, without the possibility to revolt or escape, only resignation remained. If this storyline is surprising you, leave your like right. Away, it helps us continue bringing you such fascinating stories. Theories about the journey beyond the East. But is this life as mercenaries in Alexandria, Margiana, truly the end for these legionaries? Some scholars believe their destiny was even more distant. In the 1940s, sinologist Homer Dubbs raised the hypothesis that some of these soldiers might have journeyed toward the Far East, even participating in the Battle of Carrhae in 36 BC against the forces of the Han dynasty, in the region that today corresponds to China. He based his conclusions on Chinese records that speak of Western warriors, using defensive formations reminiscent of the testudo. If these accounts are true, we would have an even more astonishing chapter. Roman legionaries acting as mercenaries, or auxiliary troops in distant conflicts under the banner of an entirely different empire. However, this theory is not widely accepted among historians, as there is a lack of solid archaeological evidence, such as coins, weapons, or even contemporary records that clearly validate a Roman presence in such battles. On the other hand, the very possibility of Romans having traveled so far fuels the imagination of many researchers and enthusiasts of ancient history. It is an enigma that to this day remains without a definitive solution. The controversy of Liqian and the DNA tests. Now let's explore one of the most controversial points of this entire story. Could a small village in China possibly harbor the descendants of these legionaries? The town of Liqian in Gansu province, China, was identified by Homer Dubbs as a possible settlement for these soldiers. Curiosity grew when local residents exhibited physical characteristics uncommon for the region, such as lighter eyes, a more pronounced nose, and even brown or red hair. All of this raised the hypothesis that they might be descendants of the ancient Romans from Carrhae. To clarify the issue, DNA tests were conducted in 2018 by Lanzhou University. The results showed that only 3 of the 87 villagers examined had genetic markers pointing to a West Asian ancestry, still without any clear correspondence to a specific Roman lineage. This does not completely disprove the theory, but it does significantly cool it down, suggesting that the town of Liqian may be a genetic melting pot of many other historical migrations rather than a lost Roman outpost. Have you ever wondered if we will ever find definitive proof of this journey? Tell us your theories in the comments. The gaps in history and the rumors that survive. With so many twists and theories, what can we really consider the truth about these missing legionaries? The reality is that the story of the 10,000 Roman prisoners after Carrhae has many more questions than answers. Some believe that most of them simply died during the forced marches, in conflicts or from natural causes, never forming lasting communities. Others argue that a significant portion was absorbed by the local population and disappeared into oral tradition, leaving no archaeological traces. There are also accounts suggesting that a fraction tried to escape, crossing deserts and mountains, in the hope of returning to Rome. If any group truly survived and headed east, it is possible they were used as currency or even traded with other nomadic peoples. Unfortunately, time erases many traces, and what remains is often fragmented into legends and scarcely documented stories. What is undeniable is that the Battle of Carrhae shook Rome's confidence, showed that its army was not invincible, and sparked a series of tensions that would later culminate in even greater conflicts. The rumors about the prisoners reinforce that history is not made up solely of numbers and dates, but also of real people whose destinies may be lost in the darkness of the centuries. The legacy of the missing soldiers. To conclude our story, one question remains: why do we still talk about these soldiers and their mysterious fate today? The disappearance of 10,000 Roman soldiers after the Battle of Carrhae is not just a historical enigma. It is also a lesson about human fragility, even within the greatest empires. The legacy they left is reflected in our considerations of the cost of war and the importance of solid strategies. Lessons that resonate to this day, whether in military history textbooks or in the mindset of leaders striving to avoid the tragic mistakes of the past. Moreover, the public fascination with this event shows how our imagination is nourished by historical gaps. Over the centuries, rumors about legionaries traveling to distant lands have inspired literary works, scientific research, and even curious expeditions in search of physical evidence. One way or another, these mysterious Romans remain alive in our collective memory, reminding us that the unknown often captivates us as much as what we already know. It doesn't matter if one day definitive proof emerges that they reached China or founded a foreign settlement. What matters is that their story continues to be told, provoking debates and fueling the flame of curiosity. We have reached the end of a journey full of surprises, tragedies, and reflections. The story of the missing soldiers after the Battle of Carrhae transcends time and space, echoing lessons about planning, hubris, destiny, and survival. Every piece of this puzzle reminds us that behind great historical events are flesh and blood men and women, each with their own story. If you enjoyed this journey through time and want more fascinating stories, subscribe to our channel, leave your like and share this video with your friends. Tell us in the comments what you think really happened to these lost legionaries. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next episode of our series on ancient Rome and the Empire.